Welcome back to Kabiga's Movie Reviews, and I've been requested to do Highlander, the 1986 film directed by Russell Mulcahy and starring Christopher Lambert, Sean Connery, Clancy Brown and Roxanne Hart. So here we go. Connor MacLeod, known as Highlander, is one of a number of immortals who throughout the centuries are chasing what is known as the prize, which is ultimate power and knowledge. Connor learns that his greatest enemy, Kurgan, is getting close to the prize and he must face off against him to ultimately stop him, as in the end, there can be only one.
So yeah, I was asked to do Highlander, which is a 1986 film as I've already mentioned, and it's a great film as a cult classic, but I have to be honest, it's really cheesy and the acting is, how should we put this, hard to watch. But that being said, it doesn't escape me that they've got a French guy in Christopher Lambert whose English wasn't very good at the time, and so when he tries to do a Scottish accent it doesn't come off very well. So they've got a Frenchman in Christopher Lambert playing a Scotsman, and they've got a Scotsman in Sean Connery playing a Spaniard who also had to try and fake a Spanish accent. For me, that is possibly one of the worst missed castings of all time. I mean, if you know any different ones, do comment below, because that has to be up there with one of the worst casting decisions ever. That being said, for me, Christopher Lambert is Connor MacLeod, you know? So he is, I can't imagine anybody else doing it, but that's also because nobody else has ever done it. So what can I say? Overall, the tone of the film is quite dark. It's quite dark a lot of the time. Even when they're in Scotland, it's miserable, it's overcast a lot of the time. So one of my things that I like in films is the sunshine and the cinematography and whatnot, and this film for me doesn't really carry it off. It sometimes feels quite oppressive, much like Blade Runner does. It's very dark and it's very enclosed and claustrophobic. Blade Runner I'm talking about right now. Highlander is similar in the sense that it is quite dark and oppressive when they're fighting in the underground car parks and all sorts of things like that. So also the sword fighting seems quite clunky, especially with these days when you compare it to things like Star Wars, where it's the lightsabers and they're all fighting and it's quite frenetic. I was watching it, and the Kurgan, when he's holding the big broadsword, obviously it's a big sword, he's holding it with two hands. It reminds me of the earlier Star Wars with Ben Kenobi and Darth Vader, where they're quite slow and it's clunky, whereas in the newer stuff it's a lot fast-paced and a lot more energetic. So that's one of the things that for me lets this film down, but it's probably because of the dates and the age of the film. It is an older film, 1986, as I've already pointed out. So, you know, in those days, these films, they didn't have the techniques that they do these days. So it does suffer from that, and it showed at the time even, because it wasn't a massive commercial success, though it has gone on to become more of a cult classic since then. Also, it's similar to Dick Tracy and Flash Gordon in the sense that it's a cheesy film. In fact, and I'm going to quote here, Rotten Tomatoes says, "People hate Highlander because it's cheesy, bombastic and absurd, and people love it for the same reasons." So that's true, and that could be true of Flash Gordon as well, because that's cheesy and absurd. And like Dick Tracy and Flash Gordon, this film has a great soundtrack, and for me that's the best aspect of it. Though believe it or not, as far as soundtracks go, there isn't one for this movie. That's right, there isn't actually a Highlander soundtrack. There was a CD released in 1995 called Highlander, the Original Scores, which basically had elements of Highlanders 1, 2 and 3 all on one CD to basically showcase the composer's music for the series. But there isn't actually a Highlander soundtrack. The closest you'll get is Queen's A Kind of Magic album, because Queen predominantly did the music for the film. And on their Kind of Magic album, you'll find Princes of the Universe, Gimme the Prize, 1 Year of Love, Don't Lose Your Head, Who Wants to Live Forever, and of course the title track, A Kind of Magic. There's another Queen song, Hammer to Fall, which plays on the radio during the film. That's from an earlier Queen album called The Works. So if you wanted a soundtrack album for Highlander, you wouldn't find one. But the Queen albums predominantly, I suppose, could act as soundtracks, though they're not soundtracks to the film. Also, the Kind of Magic World Tour was immortalised in the DVD and release of Queen Live at Wembley, which was Freddie Mercury's final recorded live performance. God rest his soul. He is greatly missed by me and a lot of people as well. So basically, what I'm here to tell you is that Highlander, for me, is not the greatest film. It's watchable, it's got some good action sequences in, it's quite quotable, and it is culturally significant in the sense that if you say to somebody there can be only one, chances are they're going to understand where that's come from. But it's a lackluster film with a great soundtrack. For that reason, I'm going to give this film 4 out of 10. If you want to watch it, watch it. It's certainly watchable. But yeah, 4 out of 10.
Thanks for watching. If you liked what you saw, please like and subscribe to see all future content.